Welcome to Mid-South Money. On this show, we talk to the movers and shakers, the who's who of Memphis and the greater Mid-South, entrepreneurs, innovators, influencers, politicians, athletes and coaches, nonprofit and business leaders. If you want to know how the money flows, please stay tuned.
Welcome to Mid-South Money. I'm your host, Phillip Cook. With me is my co-host, Harvey Cook. We thank you for tuning in. We are honored to have serial entrepreneur Carolyn Hardy on the show. Carolyn is a native of Memphis, having grown up in Orange Mound and graduated from Melrose High School and Memphis State University. Carolyn is the former chair of the Federal Reserve Memphis branch, as well as the chair of the Greater Memphis Chamber of Commerce, Soulsville Stacks, and New Memphis, and a board member of many other major organizations in Memphis, including the Tennessee Lottery, Methodist Le Bonheur, the University of Memphis, and others. Carolyn's entrepreneurial spirit was best exemplified in 2006 when she purchased the soon-to-be closing Hickory Hill Coors Brewery for $9 million and sold it 5 years later for $30 million. After selling her interest in the Coors plant in 2011, Carolyn began her transloading business, Henderson Worldwide Investments, expanded her real estate portfolio, acquired an MRO company, and is a partner in the beverage company HTW0, a metabolic drink of molecular hydrogen water. It is a pleasure to have Carolyn on the show. Welcome.
Carolyn, so glad to have you.
Thank you.
I finished your book this weekend,
Good.
and it was great. I shed a tear and I laughed. And
Well, a lot of people
congratulations on that book.
Well, thank you. A lot of people said it was an easy read, and when I was writing the book, I considered my audience. I wanted to make sure that we offered valuable advice
Right.
to entrepreneurs, people who are a little bit afraid to take that first step, because after you take the first step, the second and third becomes easier. So the purpose of the book is sort of nudge you,
Right.
get out there, okay?
Yeah, some
So
good
glad that
advice
you
in there.
enjoyed
And
it, yeah.
We'll talk about it. So you worked for some big companies in the past. You worked for Smuckers and you worked for Honeywell. And how did those companies, that experience get you ready for being an entrepreneur?
Well, I caution young people who are right out of college to look at the company that they're looking to work for to ensure that that company will allow them to progress through the organization and non-traditional jobs for them. So when I started with Smuckers, I'm an accountant by profession, by training, and I started with them as a staff accountant, then I became their controller. But as an accountant, I was responsible for accounts receivables, accounts payable, sales, IT, the insurance. I had to understand workers' comp. I had to understand just traditional insurance because we didn't have an HR department. I actually assumed the role so that I could learn about HR. So I was checking my boxes, and they allowed me to check the boxes. I was told by a mentor, said, Carolyn, the next box that you want to check, if there's not a position, find out if someone's not doing the work and go volunteer to do the work. My company was very open to that. But now skipping over to Coors, right. Coors was a much bigger organization. So if you were an accountant at Coors, if you started out as an accountant, you're going to die as an accountant. Okay?
Right.
Versus at Smuckers, after I perfected my job in accounting, I became quality manager. I was allowed to develop the first software system to make jams and jellies. That's how I moved on to Honeywell. Our jams and jelly were made with turning valves, watching the meter count the sweetener going into the batch. I was able to work with the software with Honeywell, which was Palms at the time, to develop a software program that would download the recipe, and that recipe would tell the system how much sweetener was required, what temperatures were required. So we put control systems in place. But the company allowed me to go from accounting into quality. Then from quality, I went to human resource. So now you need to know how to hire good people. You need to know all the laws and regulations associated with employment and employees. There's a lot of safety standards out there, especially in manufacturing, that you have to be aware of. And you have to understand OSHA, you have to understand FDA and all those types of things. Then of course later I became plant manager. So if you look at all of those positions that I either led or managed or whatever, or was actually in, you'll find that those are the exact same positions that you need if you're owning a company. So be very selective of the company you're working for. Make sure that they have a demonstrated past practice of allowing an accountant to go into marketing or an accountant to become their quality manager. If they have no track record, you're not going to be the first one. It's not going to happen.
Great advice.
Carolyn, it seems like you've gotten a lot of experience out of working for these big corporate companies. And there's a lot of kids that are coming out of school now that are very entrepreneurial. They have that entrepreneurial itch. They want to be the next Facebook, or they want to be the next, big company. What would you tell those kids in terms of the opportunities that corporate America can provide for them? And should they consider corporate America before jumping into kind of the world of the unknown of entrepreneurship?
I would actually recommend that they consider corporate America. And the reason being is that corporate America offers a lot of training. You want to get all that you can get from the real world. So, if you want to be in IT, corporate America is doing a lot with e-commerce. They're doing a lot with software. They're doing a lot with networking. They're constantly writing new code that's focused on the customer. That costs a lot of money. You really need to understand the ultimate consumer. You're not writing that code for you. You're writing it for an end user. They need to understand and appreciate how a customer responds. If you've only been a student, you don't know how to work with the customer. You think it's all about you. No. Once you leave mama, leave daddy, finish school, it's all about the customer. And I see a lot of young people who have not worked in corporate America, and they say, well, at 5 o'clock, that customer shouldn't call me. I'm looking at them like, how long have you been in business? Okay. You're probably not going to be in very long. Okay, if they call you at 5 o'clock, trust me, it's probably important. So you need to take the call. Listen to their question. It doesn't mean that you have to deal with it right then, because that customer probably don't want to know that night. But by taking that call, listening, and actively asking questions, you're actually engaging the customer, you're showing the customer that you're concerned, and you're showing the customer that you're on his team. Corporate America is going to insist that you respond that way. But if you're out there on your own, you've never had the experience that, you're going to find that out when that customer fires you. And that's not when you want to find out.
Right. Carolyn, one of the things that I really liked about your book was getting to know your mother.
Yes.
And she stressed education above everything else to you and your siblings.
Yes.
And to tell us about how your education, your accounting background, how did that help you in not only corporate America, but being an entrepreneur? And if you hadn't had that education, would things have been different for you?
Well, I tell people the devil's in the detail. It really is. When I started working for Coors Brewing Company, I was walking around the facility with the COO my first day on the job, and I made him a deal. I said, I would really appreciate it if you would not pay me. I'm in this shock treatment stuff. I make these crazy statements, okay? I said, I really appreciate it. I said, and I was dead serious. I said, I don't really want you to pay me. This is after 30 minutes walking around. He said, you're kidding. I said, no. I said, I want 50% of what I saved you. I say that because my training as an accountant, I look at everything and I understand the cost right away. I know how much you're wasting, I know how much shrinking, I see efficiency or inefficiency.
Right.
My education taught me how to be a great accountant and how to connect the numbers with the real world. So when I see an inefficiency, an example, when I started running the Coors facility here in Memphis, they would stop the facility every day at 3 o'clock, and the fillers and all the production would just stop. And then it would resume an hour later. And I called the managers in after seeing this for a month. It was a very consistent process, and they did this on all shifts. And I asked the manager, I said, who gave you the authority to spend $3 million? And he says, I don't have that authority. I said, you've assumed it. And he said, what do you mean? I said, you stop the line every day for an hour. And I said, and I had the habit of having a flip chart in my office. My boss always said, come take the flip chart out. I said, no, I need the flip chart. I said, I need you to go up there and write on that chart. I said, I need you to write 1 hour. Okay, let's put the cost of that 1 hour. Let's include benefits. And let's multiply it times 3, and let's multiply it times the number of employees. It was $3 million. Now let's look at the fact that we're a Teamsters plant, we're a union plant. So now my benefits were 100% of my wage costs. Okay, I said, so multiply that times 2. He was blown away. I said, that is the cost of your decision. So accounting helped me help others understand the cost of their decisions. A lot of times people think that I just made a decision. No, you just either added to the bottom line or took away from the bottom line. It did not stay the same. So my education has been invaluable.
Well, there's a lot of talk these days about, college is very expensive.
Yes.
And I'm reading articles all over the place. The Wall Street Journal just most recently, is a college education really necessary for someone to be successful in business? And I'd like to get your take on that.
It's not. It just depends on the business. As you mentioned, my mom, she insisted that her girls get a college degree and her boys at least get a skill. And you look at some of these skills like plumbing,
right?
Or if you're a fireman, or if you're a nurse, those skills, those jobs aren't going anywhere. They're not going to offshore nursing. They're not going to offshore the fireman or the teacher. Those jobs aren't going to be offshore. Now, technology is subsidizing them and helping them be more efficient, but you're never going to get rid of them 100%. My mom felt her daughters needed a college education because at that time, it wasn't normal for a woman to be a firefighter. It wasn't normal for a woman to be in some of those upper positions. So she wanted us to get a college education so we could become the lawyers, the accountants, and the teachers, and so on, jobs that she was familiar with. So her view of education at that time, I'm sure, is different than my view of education. I feel that technology allows you to be successful without a college degree. If you're really good at coding or you're a really good visionary, you can learn coding in a year and be a six-figure programmer. And then with your creativity, it can go up to millions. Because coding needs creativity. It's not just an act, it's a thought. How should the world look? How should my iPhone respond differently than it does today? That doesn't require a college degree, it requires imagination.
Right.
So you can be successful without it. But now you're going to always have those, I want my doctor to have his doctoral. Okay? I want him to go and be a resident somewhere and learn from the greats.
Right.
So you're going to always have that side, okay?
Sure.
But the other side, you're going to always need your nurses, your firemen, your plumbers. There are organizations like Nucor still, it's the best kept secret in our community. They not only pay a very, very high wage, but also if an employee has a kid that wants to go to college, they pay for the college education of the child.
Wow.
And last thing on the college education, I read a lot about the cost versus the benefit.
Right.
You don't have to go to $30,000 per semester school. University of Memphis is an awesome school. UT Knox is an awesome school.
Right.
The quality of their education is off the chart. I don't know if you know it. Well, I can't tell you this yet. There will be an announcement. The University of Memphis has achieved another level of excellence that has never been achieved before. That's right here in our community. And then you've got the Hope Scholarship that's supported by the lottery to help with that. So now you're out of pocket, instead of being $30,000 per semester, you get, $3,000 or $6,000 from Hope. You're probably spending a couple of thousand.
Right.
So if you want that education, you don't have to go to the private schools. I'm not saying don't go, I'm just saying you don't have to.
Right.
Yeah.
Carolyn, going back to entrepreneurs,
Yes.
the one thing they need is money. They need capital.
Gosh, yes.
We live in a city that is not Silicon Valley.
Right.
We don't have angel investors raining down on us, so to speak. So I would imagine folks have to get a little creative in terms of looking for capital.
Yes.
SBA loans, micro loans, you name it, people will go anywhere. Talk to us about how you fund a business, especially in a city like Memphis.
Yeah, no, it's complicated, to your point. I mean, I won't tell anybody that it's not. You take the SBA loan, the rules have changed in the last 2 years, even with SBA lending. It's designed now to really target those who really can't afford it. If you're starting a business, SBA wants you to use all of your money first. So that rule has changed. When I was pitching my company, I started out with the banks. I developed a great business plan with financials, and then I did practice pitches. So I went to the chamber and said, hey, look, I need a couple of organizations who I'm not going to ask for money to just let me practice. And you know, an entrepreneur needs that. They may think they're perfect, they're not, okay? They need to get in front of someone who looks and acts and can ask the same questions that they will be asked when they go before a bank. So I was fortunate that the chamber connected me with somebody a group that would help me with that. But my challenge was the banks weren't quite honest. And that got to be frustrating because, you know, most deals, if you have a LOI, it has a date and time that you're required to meet or the deal's off. And if you didn't meet each one of those times, Coors had the right to cancel the deal. And the banks dragging you on doesn't help with that. And so I found when I was going after my deal that I need to try to set up a deal with the bank and with someone else. So I had plan A and B. And I would tell any investor, any entrepreneur that want to be, that if you're time bound, you better have A, B, C, and D. And D, each one costs more. A is the best option and probably the hardest. And D is the most expensive and probably the least hardest, okay? But if you really want the deal, you got to decide D might be the answer. But you have to meet the date. So when I was doing my deal, I actually had a hard money lender that was I contracted with to find me money. The banks kept changing the rules of the game. One day they needed me to have another $3 million guarantor. The $3 million guarantor showed up at the meeting. Then of course the guarantor requirement became bigger, and then the rules became bigger. And I came to the conclusion that they really didn't want to do the deal, but they didn't know how to let me down gracefully. One bank was so bad that they said, "Oh, I'll have you an answer in 2 weeks." Well, 2 weeks I called, but they didn't call me. And they said, "Well, give me another week." So a week later I called, and they said, the next week I called them. I said, "Wait a minute." I said, "No, I don't need you to speak." I said, "I want to be clear. I'm a big girl. My life, the answer is yes or no. And it's not always yes. And a lot of times it's no. I can accept that. I need you to tell me, is the answer yes or no?" He said, "It's no." I said, "That takes care of it. I don't have time to have you on my to-do list every week." Okay? Because, an entrepreneur doesn't have a lot of time. Most people don't understand that. Because you are the accountant, your payroll, your HR, you're trying to make sure you're meeting local, state, and federal regulations. That's a lot of activity. And to have someone dragging you on is not what you want to do. Right. So it got to the point where I had to deal with the hard money lender, made sure that the terms made sense.
Can you tell our audience what a hard money lender is?
Oh gosh. Hard money lender is a group typically that represents people with money who wants to invest their money in non-traditional ways at much higher interest rates. Okay? They can require collateral and they cannot. It just depends. If they don't require collateral, interest rate will be higher. If they require collateral, which in my case, I had collateral because I had the brewery, my rates were bad, but they weren't ridiculous. And there's a difference between bad and ridiculous, okay? So, but SBA would have been much better, okay? And the difference between the two, I think at that time SBA was maybe 6%, and I think I was maybe 13%. So you pay a big spread, but I was told that I could have been as high as 20%. So they're non-traditional. Their rules are probably, pretty wide versus the banking institution, must follow FDIC. So they write their own rules, and they write the rules to attract people's money. They don't write the rules for the consumer. So if I want your $5 million, I'm going to create a story that I'm going to invest in beverage companies that are going to become $1 billion organizations, but they're going to pay us 15% while they're becoming big, and they're going to give us a piece of their company. So the rules there are no rules, because they can require parts of your company as part of that deal.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
Carolyn, I hope a lot of students in Memphis are going to see this show. Yeah. What advice do you have for them about preparing for a career in business outside of school?
I would tell them to volunteer for some organization that is willing to allow them to learn everything that they can possibly learn. Because what I've learned, and my daughters actually did this, they volunteered for organizations, and they let them do fundraising. You know, these are 19, 20-year-olds that corporate America is going to have somebody who's a fundraising manager.
Right.
So you're not, you won't have the opportunity to develop the plan. You won't have the opportunity to decide what the program is going to look like. You won't have an opportunity to do all the contracting that's required for events. You go to a nonprofit who doesn't have enough help, never has enough any kind of resources. You walk in and say, I'm willing to work for free, which my daughter did. They said, oh, great. We have these major events. We don't have any money, and we don't have any help. So what can you do for us? And my daughter calls me, and she's putting her plan together. I said, hey, look, I said, go to the distributors, go to these people. I gave her a list of people in Knoxville. She went to UT Knox that you can talk to. And I said, and get your elevator pitch together that this is all about these kids who are underserved from this zip code. They know the zip code, okay? And I said, here's the outcomes that you're hoping. You know, you're a role model. You're bringing in other college students who are, you know, role models for these kids. And they were there each afternoon, you know, help with homework and answer the kids' questions. So they have a face, someone to talk to. And so Jennifer got so much experience. So at the end of the event, she had raised money, the kids, you know, got the kids what they wanted. And she said, well, Mom, what now? I said, I want you to go visit everybody that gave you money or gave you anything, any kind, contributions. She said, why? I said, next you got to ask them again. Have the kids write letters. I said, you got to get to their heart,
Right.
okay? And so now she's learning how to get to the customer's heart in a non-profit. And you have to do that in the real world. But she also has to account for the money. She has to plan for it. She has to write agreements, the right contracts. I mean, there's a lot of things you have to do. But to do that under the veil of nonprofit, you have a lot less risk. When you get to corporate America, now I was, I'm writing another book, and one of the stories I wrote about was, you know, the importance of contracting and reading your contract. When I was at Smuckers, I was like 20, 21, and I missed my first termination date. And that's why it's important. Work for a nonprofit, learn these things before it costs you money, okay? Missed my first termination date on an IBM copier. We had to keep that copier another year, even though we had another one that we'd already released. So I learned at that point how important it is to terminate earlier than it allows. Then the economy, if it's 60 days, I try to do it 90 days prior.
Right.
It's very interesting.
But you learn it before it costs you thousands of dollars
Right.
on somebody else's dime.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
So we have time for one more question.
Yes. Okay.
Good. Well, so the last thing we want to talk about is ability to compete for business in Memphis.
Oh, okay.
Ability to compete for in terms of racial discrimination, gender discrimination,
Economies of scale.
economies of scale. I know you've been involved in that. What advice do you have to people, and kind of give us a brief situation update of what's going on here?
Well, you know, competing is really tough. It really is, and women, minorities, because first rule is we started 100 years later.
Right.
Okay, you think about a lot of these large companies that are out here that have been here for a long time, they have a 100-year head start. So they're already scaled, they're already capitalized. They borrowed their money when interest rates were 1%.
Right.
Okay, and we're dealing in an environment that looks very different. So scaling is very difficult, but there are creative ways that you can get around that. If you're the city and county that have written legislation to ensure that women and minorities are participating, you can actually ensure that larger companies must partner with smaller companies on contracts so that smaller company has an opportunity. So that big scale doesn't really squash them, okay? The other thing that I see, you know, happening, you know, I gave an example when you and I were talking about Crosstown, the Crosstown project
Right.
in IP Tower 4. Those were interesting projects because those are huge projects. And a woman minority company here in Memphis would probably not have participated because probably those contracts were $10, $20 million for one segment of the construction. But what they did, they broke it down into smaller pieces. Give you an example, at Crosstown, I was talking to Randy, who was the project manager for the project. He said that when they were doing the drywall, and they were looking at the plan. Apparently Crosstown was put together in 8 to 10 different sections. So what they did when they were bringing Crosstown back up, they allowed Crosstown to be worked on in its original 8 to 10 different sections. So if you did the drywall, they only bid at that one section, then they bid drywall for the next section. So drywall became 8 different bids. So now if you're a small company, instead of a $20 million drywall contract, they can get a $1 or $2 million. Somebody said, well, is that complicated breaking it down that low? No, it's not, because if someone's doing an awesome job but someone else is not doing as good a job, you need to let that one go. They just reassigned it to the group that was still there. So they had no risk. And they stayed on schedule, on budget doing that. So you're gonna have to get creative working with these companies. Other thing the city and county can do, and I say corporate America need to do as well, they need to pay these small companies on time. You know, now I'm hearing a lot about, you know, companies are asking for 45-day, 60-day, 90-day payment terms. Doesn't bother me. It really doesn't, because the cost of money is not that great. But for a small company's not paying the same that I'm paying for money, okay?
Right.
I'm paying my 3-4%, and they're paying probably that 13% that I talked about a few minutes ago.
Right.
So
Right.
in most cases, when they're bidding on these projects, their margins are 5%. So how do you pay 13% for money you only earn 5%? Those
Right.
numbers don't work, do they?
Right.
So city, county is doing a lot. I will tell you, they are trying to do things to help them with microloans. They're working with Pathway Lending to help them with loans. I think the top is $50,000. But what's going on the private sector, that's where the real opportunity is, because city and county is only worth a couple of $1 billion. And most of that $1 billion is already used in payroll. So their discretionary spending availability is very small. It's the other businesses where there's opportunities. So the Chamber of Commerce has a project called B2B, business to business. We're trying to figure out, how do we get business in Memphis to do business with other businesses in Memphis? If your economy is only growing 3%, everybody's fighting for that pie. But if you're spending money outside of Memphis, billions of dollars outside of Memphis, you bring those billions of dollars in Memphis, now it affects your employment,
Right.
it affects your real estate values, it affects your cost of money. So we're trying to get businesses in Memphis to take more ownership of our growth.
I got you. It's a great
It's
point.
very interesting.
Yeah, Carolyn, we want to thank you for being on our show.
Thank you.
I wish we had another 2 hours
Well, thank
because
you
we
guys.
can maybe we'll have you back again.
Thank you.
But I appreciate very much you being here. And also, I want you to know how much we admire what you've done, and you've been a role model for so many people in Memphis. And keep doing what you're doing. And we hope that you'll watch some of our shows on Mid-South Money
I will.
in the future. Thank you so much.
Well, I want to thank Phillip and I
Thank
want
you.
to thank Harvey for the work that you do in the community, because you know this community is a complex community, and it takes a lot of people doing a lot of different things. And I just want to encourage you to keep, you know, being a leader and trying to help educate the community on money, because that is one of our big problems.
We'll do it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for tuning in to Mid-South Money. If you have any questions for Phillip and I or our guest, please call us at 901-766-7718, or you can email us at harvey.cook@raymondjames.com.